Hello, welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
All right, so we are in the midst of the Transform series, which you talked about, so it's 7 weeks or 50 days of walking through different areas of our lives, like key areas, the ones that we typically make like New Year's resolutions about and those things. And the first week we went through spiritual health. It's looking at our health, spiritual health. The next week we did physical health. Last week we did mental health. And then so this week we're looking at emotional health. And this is all the moment where we say, man, I really want to grow up before I get old, because our emotions are one of the hardest things ever to actually take control of. And we know that we don't really change our life or change our emotions or anything until we change we actually change our thinking. And so Romans 12:2 says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. So how do you do this? Well, it's through being with God, reading the word, praying, learning, being with others, discussing, right? And that's how God renews our mind. But that's our theme verse for the series. So as we walk through today with emotional, it's important to remember that we're not looking at like every single little nook and cranny, because I know it's complicated, right? Mental health, we looked at last week, emotional health. There's so much there. There's absolutely just so many ins and outs, and many of us struggle at different times with our emotions and struggle with anxiety, depression, all sorts of things. So this isn't a one size fits all for those things, but what you will get out of it is you absolutely will get some principles that will help you in your emotional health, that you can walk out of here and say, you know what, I can do this. I can be different in my emotional health. And so it's been suggested that there's 35,000 decisions that you make every day. That if you add up all these little decisions like that, and if you break that down, if you're awake for 16 hours a day, 17 hours a day, that sort of thing. So you have thousands of decisions every hour that you're making. Okay, some of them are trivial or small, will I have honey or jelly on my toast? Or will I wear blue shirt or the black shirt, right? Easy today, you wear red if you're a Chiefs fan, right? Watch a TV show or a movie. Read a book or take a nap, right? Those have consequences for things, but those are simple decisions. We make all sorts of ones. Other decisions may be complicated. Find an heir in the production system at work, or take a job offer, or stay with your current company. But the most important decision that you make every day is whether to be mastered by your emotions or whether to master your emotions. That's absolutely the most important decision. And it changes your relationship with other people, and it changes your relationship with God. And we all make that decision every day. When it comes to football, I played football and then also coached football, and just absolutely loved the sport. And I had coaches that would just absolutely lose their ever-loving mind just when it came to game time or practice or different points. And, and then sometimes players would do things, they would just lose it. And kind of the buzzword within football is this: well, it's an emotional game, right? It's an emotional game. And kind of the idea is that it's okay that you lost your stuff. You're all in, you're giving your emotion to it. And I remember all my coaches, for the most part, I had some really good guys for coaches, but a lot of them just really would just rip you, Something would happen and they just, put you down and call you names. And, one coach would call us clowns and, use a lot of other things that I wouldn't say here or anywhere else, But then I coached football for a guy named Rick Brown. He's still coaching. Wonderful coach. Coached all over Southern California and won a lot of games. Good coach. Loves Jesus. And with Rick, it was different. He talked different to the players. He had a real high standard, and he'd coach them well and do it. But instead of ripping people when something was wrong, he'd say, pretty good. Let's do it again. And that meant that stunk. Let's do it again, right? But he was just a great coach. And I remember, so the players expected something different. They expected different managing of emotions. But I remember this one game, and there was my players. I was coaching the JV, and my players were there, and they kind of were letting down. And so I told them, I said, you guys having fun? And this one kid goes, because I was saying it facetiously, like, in other words, like, hey, I was being sarcastic. Like, you guys aren't putting it out there. And this one player says, yeah. And I said, I said, you're having fun getting your, butt kicked, and I said it differently though. And all of a sudden I had to go back to the players and apologize. I had to go back and apologize because I let my emotions get over me, and they didn't expect that. And so all of a sudden my old emotions got in there. So, emotions, with football, like we've got the Super Bowl today, you'll see them on the sideline, right? They'll zoom in at the moments. Let's see, that went really bad. Let's see what the coach's emotions are doing. Let's see if he's just red and just hot over the collar. Well, Proverbs 29, verse 11 says this: fools vent their anger, or other versions say, give full vent to their anger. And so it means that I'm just angry and I'm just going to let everybody have it. The Bible says that you're a fool if you do that. It doesn't say you're a fool if you have anger, because anger is a secondary emotion. So in other words, it lets you know that something is wrong. But it does say if you give full vent to your anger, if you let it out, if you just let that anger out, you're a fool. I remember feeling this way. Michelle and I had just gotten married. And if you've ever seen anybody have an altercation with an inanimate object, right? Anybody ever done that? You have an altercation with something that's not living. It can't talk back to you or do anything else, but you treat it, And so this computer was giving me problems. And so myself and the computer, we wrestled, okay? We were a few months into our marriage. Michelle looks at me and says, oh no, we're not doing that. And, I'm just like, okay. She's like, no, that's not how we do things in our house. I won with the computer, but it was just like, no, you're not going to do that. And I'm like, I got the point. Like, I'm not going to give vent. And that's how I felt. Like, I felt foolish. I'm like, what am I doing that I'm giving vent to my anger this way? But it says, the second part of the verse, but the wise quietly hold it back. And so there's a choice. There's a choice with what we can do, that we can either just let it out, which is foolish, or we can make a choice to do something else with it. So, are you the person that at work or home, like everybody has to walk on eggshells around because they're just like, oh, something happened. We better just not do anything. And, you got to be a real person. Things happen. But at the same time, like if you're just letting it out all the time and everybody's kind of, trying to stay away or even worse, letting you do it and then just saying, oh, it's okay. They're just, right? Then that's unhealthy. Just no doubt about it. And Bible says you're being a fool. You don't want to be foolish. So we don't want to vent our anger. We don't want to let go that way. And what hurts is that we may say, well, I lost my anger in a moment. I'm not like that every day. But the problem is that over time, it's small deposits that compound in other people's lives. So it is with any other emotion. We have all sorts of emotions, but if we just let them out and just overrun people, those compound in people's lives, and it changes our relationships with them. We will actually program people to act a certain way with us. And then when we're all good, they're not good. Why? Because we've absolutely just torn into them. And so what are emotions? That's important, right? What are these emotions that we're talking about? Because again, the verse didn't say it's bad that you have the emotion. It's what you do with the emotion, right? So much of mental and emotional health is not what we feel or what happens, but what's the meaning that I give to it? Because if I give a certain meaning to it, then I'm going to act a certain way. So emotions, your brain is an anticipation machine. Like even when you're asleep, your brain is anticipating things that are going on. And so what happens is that when there's a bump in the night when you're sleeping, or your body says, what is that? And it tries to respond. Or if you're driving down the road and your brain is looking for different things that could happen, it's taking information that you've given it so that you can act quickly to protect you, right? And so depending on what you put in your brain is going to be real quick slicing everything that's going on for what's happening. Like if you're like in the middle of like camping. We used to go backpacking all the time through Yosemite. And we would always deal with bears because bears would come and want the food and different things. And I mean, they'll eat your toothpaste if you leave it out, right? And so you don't want to do that. So, but when you're sleeping and there's bears around, because we've put the information in our brains, like, hey, if a bear comes into camp, we all get up and let them know, hey, get out of camp. We're here. We don't have anything for you, right? And so while you're sleeping, your brain is saying, waiting for a bear, listening for, sticks rattling or that sort of thing. And so your brain is getting ready for motion. Like even the word emotion speaks of getting ready for motion. It gets you ready for what you need to do. So when something happens, you get these primary emotional responses. And your primary emotional responses is like that initial, I need to be in motion. Your body will react to that right away. Now, you may cross your arms. Like that's how you'll know you're having an emotional response. You may tighten your shoulders. If it's a good thing, you may smile. But you may tighten your jaw. And that's actually like the primary emotion point where you can actually take control. Because if you notice yourself, like in a situation, somebody says something to you, and the problem is you've given information that when somebody says like, they talk about your work, like, well, hey, this thing's, that's okay. And you have this trigger with okay. Even one of my mentors, like somebody that I really respect. And, at one point I told the person, I'm disappointed that you didn't do this. Oh, wow. That was a trigger word. It was just this, they really let me have it. And why? Because they had in their mind, disappointed means da-da-da-da-da, which it was just a very simple thing that I was talking about. And so we have all this information and it's ready to roll at that moment. But as soon as you hear that trigger, your body will do something. Like for me, I'll tighten my jaw at certain things. Or all of a sudden your breathing gets going. And that's the point where you have to intervene because you're getting hijacked, right? And then so the primary response turns into a certain emotion, right? And so shame, guilt, anger, sadness, joy, or fear, right? Something to remember is you deal with other people or with yourself. It's absolutely just fruitless, and it's just a fool's journey to try to debate with your emotions. So, you may have a child and they're crying because they got a bad grade on their test, or they didn't make the sports team, or let's say your spouse or a family member didn't get the promotion at work, or somebody said something to them and they're crying, right? So they're sad or they're hurt, right? Saying to somebody like, why are you crying? You shouldn't be crying and you shouldn't be sad because all kinds of other people didn't make it too. All kinds of other people didn't do well too. It's absolutely just a crazy thing to say because emotions are not debatable. What somebody is feeling is what they're feeling. You cannot tell them to feel something differently. It's what's programmed in there, and it is what it is. And so you have those emotions. So you should give other people grace and give yourself grace as well when you feel those things. And especially guys sometimes, women have this too at times, but kind of this thing of like, well, why are you crying? Why are you sad? Be a man, that sort of thing. It really hijacks men, I think, with their relationship with God and with their spouses, with their wives too. Because what it says to them is it says, you shouldn't allow this feeling to be played out or to be shown. And you shouldn't entertain it, and you shouldn't like interact with it. And here's the hard thing. God primarily interacts with us with our emotions. That's what that's the highway that God moves on to interact with you, right? What does the Old Testament say? All throughout, you see the people of God like failing and just time and time again. And then God says, I have compassion for you, my unfailing compassion for you. My love is never ending for you. You see God show emotion. That's how God shows himself to us, is in the highway of our emotions. So if you have somebody that says, I'm not emotional, I'm not an emotional person, I don't deal with my emotions, I don't do emotions, you will stunt your relationship with God because you won't be able to interact with God because that's how he primarily interacts with you. And so we see this graphically illustrated in the first book of the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis. It's the book of beginnings. So in the book, at this point, Adam and Eve have fallen. It's a fallen world. There's sin in the world. People are not living in a relationship with God the way that they should. They're not living in a relationship with each other the way they should. And it was emotions that were hijacked and mental health that was hijacked. You see shame has entered in the world where God says, hey, where are you? And they say, well, we're hiding from God, right? You hide because we didn't want you to see us the way that we were. And so within this world, Adam and Eve have brought this in, and now they have children, right? Cain and Abel. And so you see with Cain and Abel, you see someone not managing their emotions, or they're being managed by their emotions, being mastered by it in Genesis 4, verse 3. So let's read that together. When it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best portions of the firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. This made Cain very angry. Okay? And he looked dejected. So Cain at this point is being hijacked. His emotions are taking over him. He has those. And will he be a fool or will he hold it in? Will he do something else with it? So God says, why are you so angry? That's what he asked Cain. Why are you so angry? So again, God interacting with us in our emotions. That's the highway that he comes in. Now, a key, if you ever want to not be hijacked by your emotions, ask yourself a question. Because it stops all those chemical responses and all the programming and says, what does this really mean? That's what God is doing. And when you have a close relationship with God, when you're listening to him and you're spending time with him in the normal times, when those key moments come up, then guess what? You can actually interact with him at that point and hear from him. And he's saying, why are you so angry? What's going on? Like, what's really going on? Is it this, right? And what God's doing is he's getting to a deeper issue. So he says, why do you look so dejected? And in verse 7, you will be accepted if you do what is right, but if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door. So now emotions not only go from just kind of venting and being foolish, but now sin is coming out. So now a sin is I'm sinning against God and other people. So sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and be its master. So God is empowering there. He's empowering us and saying, you don't have to give full vent to your anger or any other emotion. And it's important that you don't because sin is right behind you. So God empowers and says, you have the power. I've given you the will to not be mastered by it. You will be its master. But Cain chooses not to do this. It says, one day Cain suggested to his brother, let's go out into the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. And so things got worse where people were separated from God. They weren't living right there with God. Something needed to happen. And now it gets worse. It goes to the next generation. If you fast forward, Cain is exiled and he was the father of the Canaanite people. Right? A people that were kind of always at odds. But in some way, God still worked through them and still was redemptive in some way, even with the Cain in his descendants as well. So the writer of Hebrews in the New Testament actually tells us why Cain's sacrifice wasn't accepted. And it's the same reason that he let his emotions take him over. In Hebrews verse 11, verse 4, it says, it was by faith that Abel brought a more acceptable offering to God than Cain did. Abel's offering gave evidence that he was a righteous man, and God showed his approval of his gifts. Although Abel is long dead, he still speaks to us by his example of faith. And so, what was the difference between Cain's sacrifice and Abel's? Abel's sacrifice was by faith. And so it was built upon relationship. It was built upon emotions. His emotions were engaged with God. Because to have faith, you have to engage your emotions. You can't have faith unless you engage your emotions with God. And so, I mean, even if you say, well, I'm not a mushy guy, or I'm not a mushy woman, but like, so do I have to be that way if I'm with God? No. Like the same coach, Rick Brown, I remember one time we went 0-9 this season. Okay, it was bad. We started out at a different school, and it was a military school on the beach in Carlsbad. The scenery was great, but the record was horrible. And so we started out, and it was just going bad, and the guys weren't playing well, and we didn't feel great. And so Rick is a follower of Jesus. He gets up on this table at halftime. He jumps up on this table and he goes, and he's trying to get them motivated to like lay it all out there. And he goes, do you know why I'm a follower of Jesus? Because he gave it all. And he's got the, steam coming out of his ears. And he's just, I gave it all. And Rick was a very emotional guy connecting with Jesus, very loving in those things. But I saw a picture of Jesus, and like you can connect with Jesus in those emotions. Just the giving it all to God. Jesus giving it all to the Father so that you and I could know him like we celebrated today. And Rick connected with Jesus in that moment. And you should have seen the guy's eyes. I will tell you that after we went out, right after he did that, we went out and lost even worse. But they knew something about Jesus, okay? They knew that Jesus was gnarly, that Jesus gave absolutely everything. And so Cain, though, had kind of like a stale, emotionless, faithless religion. It was based upon, well, if I do these things, then I get these results. If I just, well, this is what I do. But there wasn't any emotion involved. It was just about him just following a set of rules, and this is how you do it. It was more religion, right? But religion is not the way to God. Jesus is the way to God. And to know Jesus, it absolutely takes emotions. And so we don't know why Cain's sacrifice wasn't accepted in Abel's was, though, how they knew they weren't accepted, right? There's different theories. Maybe it was like fire came down and burnt it up. We don't know. But we just know that God showed them however they would know that it wasn't accepted. And it wasn't that Cain brought like crops and Abel brought, a lamb. It was the heart behind it. God always looks at the heart. We see that with King David, right? David was a man after God's own heart. And it wasn't that David had all this outward stuff that everybody could see. It was that God saw something with David that nobody else saw. And that's why God chose him. Such is life, right? Like God chooses different people to do different things. Even though we may have our criteria and walk through certain things, God chooses people based on what's inside of them. Like he sees things that we don't. And so in its emotions, David connected with God on an emotional level. And so we have all these things swirling inside of us. What we're talking about is very difficult, to not be mastered by our emotions. I mean, I had to learn this the hard way a lot as a young man. I watched too many action movies with like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and those kind of stuff. I just watched way too many of those because I had all these people that were my role models, right? I saw these guys in football, and it was just this, in the moment, you just full vent to your anger, full vent to what you want to do. And so I tried that in life and relationships as a teenager, and it doesn't work, right? You can't live that way. You can't do that. And so what do we do? How do we do this? Well, there's a way that we're going to see illustrated, and we're going to watch it in a video with Patrick. And Patrick is very vulnerable, and he shares his story. And he's going to share about struggling with depression, struggling with anxiety and different things. But so I'm not saying that, hey, and you can just cure all of this with that. But notice that he chooses to link up with Jesus, and everything's different because of that. So let's watch together.
Throughout most of my childhood, I was really, really happy. I was very sociable. Nothing was really seeming to go wrong in the world. I ran cross country and track and built up an amazing group of friends. I started doing that in middle school and high school. And then I went to college at SBU for a year. And then I started to get very sick. I struggled with depression for a while after I got there. My parents were going through divorce. All these different things. I was pulling away from the team. I wasn't being social anymore. That really gave the enemy a stronghold into my life. And so I didn't feel God's presence anymore, even being on a Christian campus. I was taking matters into my own hands and not letting God speak to me. I was letting every evil thing into my life, and it was shutting me away from the world. And so I started struggling with depression again and anorexia. That was kind of my outlet for, I don't really want to be in the world anymore, so I'm just gonna start slowly checking out passively. And I struggled with that until I had to leave in my third semester for health. Shortly after that, I bounced back and forth between living with my mom and my dad. If I had kept going the way I was going, I probably had maybe a week or so left to live because vitals were so far down, and I was about ready to die. And so my dad had no other choice. He had to take me to, at the time, research at a program that helped you cope with depression, and also for people with anorexia and things like that. So I was in a room basically by myself in a critical unit for 2 months. Even those couple of months there didn't quite pull me out of it. It put my demons in my past for a while, and I was really happy, and I started coming to church here shortly after that. After 6 months, a year, I started falling back into the old habits again. I wasn't reading my Bible, I wasn't praying, I wasn't doing anything, and I started to fall back into those patterns. So I was in a very dark place, and family can be there, friends can be there, but then you start to push those people away. But the one aspect of my life that I was never able to push away, because you can't push God away, you can't push Jesus away. This has been a struggle for more than a decade for me, and I'm not gonna let depression beat me. I'm in a healthy place in my life now, mentally and physically. I've got work to do just like everybody else, and there's, like I said, days that are easier than others. But I'm always gonna be able to bring it back to God and the fact that you can push people and everything out of your life, but you can't push Jesus out. If He's actually in your heart and you've walked with Him, He's walking with you every step of the way. And it's just, I don't know what I would do without this church. I don't know what I would do without my faith. And just when those times when God's not speaking, that's when you try and put things together for yourself, and that's when you make a mistake. I think sometimes it's just better to just stop talking and just listen, and that's really what's gotten me through most of my issues. I used to think of running as a right, like it's my right. I can just get out and exercise, but no, it's actually a gift, because there's a lot of people who just love to be able to take a few steps in a row. So in the middle of every run, when I'm at the halfway point, I say, God, at least you've given me half of this run, because I don't know when it's ever going to be taken away. And I always say, thank you for every step, thank you for every second. Thank you for every minute, thank you for every mile, for every inch, for every stride that I've taken today. And then I say, God, please just take this up as an offering to you. I look at every run as a work of art, because I'm giving it to God. And some people might think, oh, all you're doing is putting one foot in front of the other. But no, for me, that's something that I love to do, and God's allowed me to have that passion and to utilize that to bring peace to myself, and hopefully that's why I view it as something I'm giving back to God. He's given me a gift, so I want to try and give that back in some way.
Yeah, give Patrick a hand. He's on the facilities staff at our friends at Vineyard North up there. He's on the staff there, and just a wonderful, wonderful man. And did you catch it? Right, the things that he said, like, just stop talking and listen to God. Now you say, well, I don't know, I don't know, right? But here, when you stop talking and you listen, translated, being emotional with God, right? Because when I'm just talking, when I'm just steering the ship and I'm just doing it, I'm just in charge. I'm in charge. And did you see what he said? Like when he was in charge, when he just did whatever he wanted, and we did those things, then it went bad. Things came into his life. And so he opened himself up where he could be with God. Jesus spoke to people like Patrick and like you and I and to the people in his day. In Matthew 11, 28 through 30, it says this. He says, then Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. And so, did you catch it? Jesus says, come to me and link up with me. I will give you rest. And so the whole idea is to be with him. Because here's the interesting thing. This is already happening, but you may not have ever recognized it. Throughout your day, and then especially when you stop to pray or read the Bible, or even right now, you are deciding what God feels when he's with you. Right? So slow down and think. You're with God. You're sitting there. It's you and him. And you approach and you say, hi, it's me. It's me again. How does he respond? What does he feel when you say hello? We've all walked into a room and we say, hey, and everybody's like, eh. Is that how God is with you? Or is God like, okay, all right. It's like when you see your boss or the principal. Anybody spend a lot of time in the principal's office, right? Okay. I kind of felt bad. When I get into high school, it was always the vice principal, because there's two principals, and the vice principal would handle all the dirty business for the principal. So, but you go into the principal's office, and it's like, well, tell me what happened. Or you go into your boss's office and you didn't really get things right, or you didn't hit your numbers or that sort of thing. So what happened? What did you do? What did you get wrong? Okay, why did that happen? How are you going to improve? If you don't make a change on this, things are bad. Things are going to go bad for you. Is that how God is with you? But it's all recognizing how his emotions are. And Jesus is God in the flesh. It says in John, it says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, he says to his disciples. He's the exact representation of God. And so the way you see Jesus connect with people emotionally is the way that God connects with people emotionally. And so when Jesus says to people, he says, come to me, link up with me. I'll give you rest if you're tired. He's saying, will you share your real self with me? You will never get to know God. You'll never experience and enjoy God unless you share your emotions with him. And so what does God feel when he's with you? Well, the good news is if we have misinformation about that, and hold on, I want to dive into this. Some of us are like, yeah, that's for everybody else, but not me. Listen, I had this tomcat, it was my brother's cat when I was a kid, and his name was Charlie. And he had the cut off tail, and Charlie would come home for he'd be home for a few weeks, and then he'd take off for a month sometimes. And he'd come back just beat up, chewed up, just flesh hanging off, looking all scraggly, thin, hadn't eaten much. He'd hang out, he'd get healthy, and then he'd head back out. And then finally, Charlie never came back at one point. But every time we would see Charlie come home, like we'd see it, we had property out in Central California, and so we'd see, like, look kind of over here, we'd like, is that Charlie? And just the emotion, we loved to see Charlie. We weren't like, you're bad, where have you been, what have you been doing? Because we could tell, you're beat up. And so it is with God. Not that you're a cat, people, if you hate cats, but it's just, God is that way with you. Every time he sees you, he's so excited to be with you. Every time you turn your heart towards him a little bit, he is like overjoyed to be with you, like you are and excited at a certain point. He's just overjoyed to be with you. He feels excitement for you. He doesn't say, oh, it's this one. This one's kind of dull. I should have put a little bit more into this one. No, he uniquely made you. And when he sees you, he loves you and he actually rejoices over you. So what does God feel when you are with him? It's a good question. And so my challenge of a way that you could take this home and improve, because it will not only improve your relationship with God, it will improve your relationship with yourself and others, because it will help you with your emotions. It'll help you because here's the exercise. Take 2 minutes a day for the next week, focusing in on what God is feeling when you are with him. Like, what is God feeling when you are with him? Just take 2 minutes and do it for a week, 7 days. Sit down. Hey, God, it's me. And try to focus in on his emotions. And you say to yourself, I don't know if I can do that. That sounds like level 8 spirituality. No, listen, everybody can do this. And here's why. All of us have walked in, maybe with our parents, like you come in and maybe you're a kid and you've got all these muddy clothes and stuff, and you walk into your house and you're so happy you've been in the mud, but you're tracking mud everywhere, and there's your mom or your dad and they're just looking at you. You sense their emotions, right? You sense what they're feeling. You sense what's going on. Or your boss at work or your spouse, you sense if they're joyful or happy. You can do it with God too. And this will absolutely transform your relationship with him. And it will transform your emotional health. And it'll transform you to know what you feel and realize that you don't have to give vent to things as well. So here, you guys, is the information. I'm gonna cheat ahead and let you know what God feels when he's with you. I'm gonna cheat ahead and let you know what God feels when you say hello to him, when he sees you. This is what he feels. The Bible tells us. Zephaniah in the Old Testament says this, Zephaniah 3:17, for the Lord your God is living among you. He is a mighty Savior. He will take delight in you with gladness. With his love, he will calm all your fears. He will rejoice over you with joyful songs. What God feels when you are with him, no matter your performance, no matter what you've done or what you haven't done, what God feels when you are with him is rejoicing and happiness. And he sings songs. Like right now, can you picture God singing a song for you? A joyful song when you come to him. And it's like this, to put it in perspective, is think of your favorite artist, your singing artist or your band. Like your favorite concert. Like you could go to their concerts like every day, all day long. And usually they don't play anything unless it's tens of thousands of people. And let's say it's whatever band that is, and they open up the curtain and they're putting on this concert just for you. And they're playing it just like they would if there was tens of thousands of people, but it's just for you. Imagine, so if it's U2 or whether it's, I don't know, Justin Bieber, if you're a Bieber, whatever that is, I don't know, or whoever it is, whoever your favorite artist is, they're going to put on a concert for you. That's like God, but God is so much better than all those people, and he sings over you when you come to him. Isn't that good? Isn't that good news that that's how God is for us, that he's emotionally aligned with us. And let me say this, because some of you guys are feeling right now like, I don't know. You're asking me to be all kind of like wishy-washy and soft and all this stuff. No, God is able to meet you with the emotions that you need. You don't have to meet with the emotions that other people need. No, he made you. He knows you. He knows how you tick, how you're made, and he knows how to meet up with you.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.